was an ordinary morning until the phone rang. Lucas, just 10 years old, was in the living room, playing with his toys. He still remembers the sensation of the cold morning wind hitting his face, the soft light streaming through the windows. Nothing suggested that his world was about to collapse. The voice on the other end of the line sounded distant, and the sound of crying that followed was enough to knock Lucas off his feet. His father had died. An accident. The words were hard to process, and Lucas felt his body freeze. It couldn't be true. He couldn't accept it. His father, the man who had always been his hero, who made him laugh with his jokes and hugged him tightly when he needed it most, was no longer there. And the thought that this was caused by something so senseless left him stunned. He didn't know how to react. The pain came like a wave, strong and relentless, and the first feeling that surged in his heart was anger. Anger at God. Anger at everything. Why now? Why him? Why had God taken him from his life so soon? Lucas couldn't understand. He shut himself off from the world. There were no explanations that could calm his soul. And in the midst of his pain, the only certainty he had was that God, the one his father had always trusted, no longer deserved his faith. The emptiness took over him, and Lucas, still a child, found himself facing an emotional storm he didn't know how to escape. The years passed, but Lucas's anger didn't fade. At 14, he still wondered why his father had to be taken, and the emptiness he felt was only filled by anger. Anger at God, anger at life, anger at everything that was good and true. Every smile seemed like a reminder of something he could no longer have. Every laugh, a distant echo of the father he had lost. He pulled even further away from those who tried to offer comfort. His mother, with a broken heart, tried to reach her son, but Lucas couldn't find any meaning in her words anymore. God won't abandon you, she said. But those words, which once seemed powerful, now meant nothing. He felt that the faith she still held was weak, like a futile attempt to fill the hole in their hearts. But he didn't want to listen. Lucas began to believe that God was distant, that he didn't care about the pain of a boy who had lost his father. With every prayer, his anger grew. What more did he need to see that God was far away, that he hadn't answered his pleas? He didn't understand. The emptiness he felt inside was deeper than any explanation they could give him. Anger became a part of his identity. He carried it like a weight, unaware of how much it was driving him further away from the world around him. Friends distanced themselves. His mother, still trying to maintain peace at home, didn't know how to touch her son's heart. Lucas simply wasn't there anymore. When Lucas turned 18, he was no longer the boy who used to play in the living room with his toys. He had lost himself in his own anger. The pain of losing his father was still embedded in his chest, but now it manifested in impulsive choices, in actions that pushed him even further away from the people who truly cared about him. He dropped out of school, and the promises he had made to himself to become a better person were left behind, lost amidst the chaos he had created. Lucas's life was becoming a downward spiral. He got involved in friendships that only dragged him deeper, and his view of the world grew narrower. The days were a repetition of lonely nights and confused thoughts. Every time he walked past the street where his father used to take him to school, a sharp pang of pain reminded him of what he had lost. But the anger he felt was stronger. He wondered why he should care to do something good for himself or for others. Nothing made sense anymore. His mother, growing more distant, tried to talk to him, but her words couldn't break through the walls of bitterness that Lucas had built. He didn't want to listen. He didn't want to remember that once upon a time he had believed life could be good, that God could make a difference. Now, he was determined to live in his pain, to carry his anger like armor, convinced that nothing and no one could change him. On an unexpected trip, Lucas found himself face to face with Donna Helena, a friend of his mother who had always been like an aunt to him. Donna Helena, with her white hair and warm smile, had never stopped showing affection, even when Lucas distanced himself. She was a woman of faith, calm, and always spoke of God in a way that seemed simple, yet profound at the same time. The conversation happened unexpectedly. Lucas was passing through a neighboring town when he decided to visit Donna Helena's house. He didn't know why he made that decision, but upon entering her home, he felt a peace that seemed to come from a place far removed from the pain he carried. Donna Helena welcomed him as always, with a warm embrace, and soon the conversation turned to what he had been avoiding the most, his father. "Lucas," began Donna Helena in a gentle voice, "your father always had unwavering faith. He believed that even in the most difficult times, God was with him every step of the way." Donna Helena's words were like a sharp blade, cutting through the wall of anger Lucas had built around his heart. He had never really thought about his father's faith in this way. In Lucas's mind, God had failed him. But as he listened to Donna Helena, a small doubt began to arise. "I know you feel angry, Lucas, but your father believed that God never abandons anyone, not even in death." These words echoed in Lucas's mind, and he felt something stir inside him. Maybe not everything made sense about life and death, but perhaps, just maybe, there was something there to be understood. In the days following his encounter with Donna Helena, Lucas couldn't get her words out of his mind. His father had always believed in something greater, in a God who never abandoned him, even when circumstances seemed cruel. Lucas tried to understand, but the anger was still there, pounding loudly within him. However, something began to change. He started to look at his life and the moments he had shared with his father, and the way he viewed everything seemed different. He remembered the nights when his father, despite being exhausted, still found the strength to play with him. He remembered the mornings when his father would wake him up with a smile and a hot cup of coffee, telling him that life was meant to be lived fully, and that, even in difficult times, God was by his side. His father wasn't perfect, but he firmly believed that God guided him, that even in suffering, there was a purpose. Lucas began to understand that his father hadn't been a victim of a senseless tragedy. He started to realize that behind the pain of his father's death, there was something he hadn't been able to see before. He thought of Donna Helena's words, and he began to understand that his father believed that in every moment of life, even in the hardest ones, God was there, guiding and sustaining. Those memories, which had once made him cry with anger, now brought a mix of longing and regret. Perhaps for so long, he had closed himself off to the truth his father had tried to teach him. Perhaps now was the time to listen. Lucas began to pay attention. For the first time in years, he stopped shouting at the sky and started to observe the earth. And in the small details, he began to see something that had once been invisible. He remembered how, during the darkest days after his father's death, there had always been someone nearby, a neighbor offering help a teacher being patient, or even his mother, who despite her pain, never stopped caring for him. All of this had seemed like coincidence until now. But now, he began to see it differently. He recalled the times when he felt on the verge of falling apart, but something small prevented it. A song on the radio with lyrics that spoke exactly what he was feeling. An old note from his father, hidden in a book, or an unexpected conversation with a stranger who said exactly what he needed to hear. They were small whispers, almost imperceptible, as if someone had been there all along, even when he thought he was alone. And then, Lucas understood. God had not been absent. He had never left his side. The divine presence had been disguised in the details of absence. In moments when everything seemed lost, God didn't shout. He whispered. And Lucas, consumed by anger, had no ears to listen. Now, with a heart more open, he realized that it wasn't pain that had hidden God, but his own refusal to see him in the midst of it. Little by little, Lucas began to understand that his father's absence had revealed a new form of presence, a presence that didn't replace, but sustained. Lucas didn't become a man of faith overnight. His journey wasn't marked by supernatural miracles or instant revelations. It was a quiet path, made up of small but steady steps. For the first time since his father's death, he began to pray. At first, still with distrust. His words were short, almost whispered, as if speaking to someone who might not be listening. But he persisted. And, as the days passed, something inside him began to calm down. He started attending church again with his mother. He sat in the back, head down, not expecting any great emotions. But there, amid songs and simple words, Lucas began to feel something different, a peace he couldn't explain. It wasn't the absence of pain, that was still there. But now, there was also room for hope. He began to read the verses his father had loved so much, and, in particular, he clung to one that seemed to have been written just for him. The Lord is near to the brokenhearted, Psalm 34:18. Over time, Lucas stopped blaming God and began to talk to him. And in this process, he realized he didn't need to understand all the answers. What he needed was to trust, even without seeing. The boy who had asked why God allowed his father to die was now beginning to understand that even in absence, God had never left him alone. The years passed, and Lucas was no longer the young man lost in anger and pain. Now, he was a man at peace with the past, not because the pain had disappeared, but because he had learned to live with it from a new perspective. He began visiting orphanages and talking to children who, like him once, had questions too difficult for their age. He spoke about loss, about longing, but above all, about hope. He didn't offer ready-made answers, but he shared his story with honesty and faith. In one of these encounters, a child looked at him with teary eyes and asked, "Why did God let my father die?" The question pierced him like an arrow, but now he had something to say. He knelt down, took the child's small hands in his, and answered, "I asked that question for many years, but today I understand that God didn't leave me alone. He was with me the whole time, even when I didn't realize it." Lucas's pain became a bridge, his story a beacon for others. And the emptiness he once felt was little by little filled with a greater purpose: to be a comfort for those who suffer, to be a presence where there is absence, to be a reflection of the same God who had been with him in silence. The boy who once rebelled against the heavens, now looked at them with gratitude. And every time he told his story, he honored the Father who had passed and the God who had never abandoned him.
Jesus said, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light." If you felt impacted by this video, or if you know someone who would benefit from it, please share it and let us know your thoughts in the comments. Thank you so much for being here.